Our next panel discussion is titled, Leadership, Why Women at the Front? I'd like to introduce our panel moderator, Osprey Orielle Lake, co-founder and executive director of Women's Earth and Climate Action Network.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a very short panel, so I'm going to quickly introduce the esteemed women here, and then very quickly, and you can look at their bios more thoroughly in the program. So I'm just going to go down the line here. Sitting next to me is Janice Hall, who is from Natural Network International. And sitting next to her is Joanie Klar, who is a media producer. And sitting next to her is Leanne Wheeler, who is an Air Force veteran. And last but not least is Leilani Münter, who is the carbon-free girl. So, and my name's Osprey, and as you know, this session is about women and climate change and women's leadership in climate change. And Sally really asked me to give a framework, and then I'd like to hand it to all of you to share your information with us. One of the things that we found out at the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network is that one of the most untold stories about climate change, both in terms of impact and solutions, has to do with women. And this is something that you can read about in full detail on the Women's Climate Action Agenda, which you can download on our website, which is at wecaninternational.org. It's a full analysis that was put together, the foundations of it, at a summit that was held in 2013 with 100 women from around the world. And Sylvia Earle was there, and we had Jane Goodall, and it was just an amazing host of women around the world, including a lot of indigenous and frontline women. So I'm just going to share a little bit of that information with you, because often when we talk about women's leadership, there's a sense of that it's the right thing to do. We somehow know that we're missing the balance of women's leadership in the world, and that is also part of the reason we're in this predicament. We've been living in a society and culture that for thousands of years has been patriarchal, both in terms of seeing dominion over the land and dominion over women. And it's not working out very well for us. So we understand that, including indigenous voices, the voices of nature, we also need to really uplift women's voices and the feminine aspect of humanity. So we all have a sense of that, but I wanted to lay out actually a few of the statistics so that we know this intuitively, but I also want you to know that we actually can't get through the door of sustainability without women.
That's correct.
So, yes. Yeah, so, two aspects. First, women are impacted first and worst by climate change. A lot of the issues around climate change, of course, have to do with frontline communities. And so we're talking about women of color, we're talking about indigenous women, we're talking about women in developing countries. Again, because of the lack of women's rights and gender inequality, they're the ones who actually get impacted first and worst. Of the 26 million people that have been estimated to be displaced by climate change since 2010, of those 26 million, 20 million of those are women. We're seeing that whenever there is a natural disaster, again, because of a lack of women's rights, women are at a big disadvantage economically, their voices aren't heard, sometimes they're not even taught how to swim or drive, so they get stuck in very dangerous situations. I could go on, but I want to flip it over and tell you that even though women are impacted first and worst, what is amazing to me about the Women in Our Network, they'll be the first to say, we are not victims, we are the solutions. And they're absolutely right. So as an example, we know that food is going to be a huge issue in the coming years. 60 to 80% of all household food production in developing countries is done by women. So all these conversations about food sovereignty, food security, saving seeds, you're talking women. Many United Nations studies show that if you're going to do anything about water and how we're going to manage our water systems, again, it's the women who are collecting the water. It is the women who know the water knowledge because they've been collecting the water for years. And if you don't involve these women in the water programs, they don't work. There's also some foundational pieces to sustainability. It's been proven over and over again. If you empower women through jobs and education, populations stabilize. We need that. Health of communities. That improves with women in charge. When you have our local economies, and we know we need to change them into different types of economies, and also they need to improve, this happens through the education of women and their empowerment. So it's just really remarkable what happens when you bring women into the equation. I also want to talk about women in the global north. 80% of all consumer purchases in North America are decided by women. So when we're talking about moving to a clean energy economy and wanting to get solar panels on roofs, you better talk to women because 80% of what is being decided in terms of what's being purchased is in the hands of women. In the US, women vote more and give more of their philanthropic dollars to environmental issues. Women's involvement in decision-making has big implications for different types of environmental treaties. It's been shown, a study that was done of 130 countries found that countries with higher female parliamentary representation were more apt to vote for environmental treaties. So even at the policy level, we can see it's really important to have women in leadership roles. Lastly, and I am talking fast because I want to move on down the line here, so thank you. That's why I showed you the report, so you could read it more carefully. I think something else that's really interesting in terms of systemic change, which is that when we're looking at true transformation, because we know we need to change not just our political structures, obviously how we're living in relationship with nature, but at the deep level of changing how we're living with each other and the earth, we often see climate change and environmental degradation as these huge, gigantic problems, which they are. And so it's really easy to say, well, we need to have these huge top-down measures to fix these huge problems. I would encourage you to look at the fact that a lot of the solutions are actually coming from the grassroots up. And it's been shown over and over again that small-scale actions like local organic farming, local agroecology, these small-scale programs, often run by women, often led by women, and successfully done so, are adding up to these huge successes. And so it's a very different framework in terms of having circular economies, local economy, moving locally, and the stewards that hold that knowledge best are women. They have the social capital and the knowledge to hold these local economies together and move these grassroots solutions in a very high capacity of success. So I wanted to give you this framework so that as we hear from all the women panelists, that you understand that it's not just how amazing women are, which they are, but also that we absolutely must change our paradigm and bring women to the decision-making table and also honor the way that they think and how they put their programs together. So with that, I'll give you the floor.
Wow, thank you, Osprey. And I think you framed my comments quite well because I'm going to take on that consumer piece. I've been in the natural products industry for decades, and I was very privileged to be part of the birthing of an industry that started with Aunt Betty's favorite cookies and a bunch of hippies smoking pot with good ideas. And we grew it to an industry, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry heading into the $1 trillion. And you know, it was originally called the natural foods industry. I renamed it the natural products industry, and we're moving towards what many of us are hoping to be the conscious products industry. And so what I've been doing with Natural Network International since 1991, my mission statement is to work with people and products of integrity that contribute to a healthier, more just and sustainable world. Well, that does narrow my playing field down a lot, but hopefully it's going to start growing. And to that end, I believe these goals can't be attained unless we look at this from a holistic and systemic nature. And we need to address runaway capitalism, the made in America syndrome that the world wants to emulate. It's pulling everybody down. And I believe, as we all do here, that engaging women on every level is the key to creating the tipping point that we need to change, to make true social and environmental change. We all know that women move the market. I read somewhere that if the consumer economy had a sex, it would be female. I'm going to run down a bunch of figures because it's, as Osprey said, it's great. We all intuitively know these things, but I'm in the backdrop of what I'm saying. I'm going to, it's small, isn't it? Wow, how come?
It's working.
Oh, it's up there? Okay. As Osprey said, women make 80% of all buying decisions, and we also have a multiplier effect because we're influencers. So the yay or nay we give to family and our social networks around us influences buying decisions. And boomer women, which they have more spending clout than any other group of women in history. and 50-plus American women are the healthiest, wealthiest, and most active generation. But as a boomer myself, I know that many of them were jaded or they got disappointed by not getting there in the 60s and 70s with the movement. Many of them got wealthy, as it says here, and they've got complacent. So we really need to wake that movement up. And it says that women will control 2/3 of consumer wealth in the United States in the next decade. So even though we have a lot of women to lift up, we've already lifted a lot of women up, and those women are very powerful. So you can read the rest of those figures. Oh, the one that I think is really powerful, millennials surpassed baby boomers last November. So my goal is to really build a bridge, and my last name is Hall. I collect millennials, I love them. They're going to be, running the world when I'm in my hydrogen-powered rocking chair or solar-powered rocking chair. If we can build a bridge between millennials and the baby boomers, we have a tipping point, period. So these are just some figures of what I'm calling the conscious products marketplace, $1.5 trillion by 2020. This is the Natural Marketing Institute's figures. These are extremely powerful, and you can see the breakdown there. And the interest in conscious consumption solutions is titanic. And so there's these dynamics have all been broken down into categories. These are the low-hanging fruit. And they all have huge spheres of influence to influence those who have not jumped on board for climate change yet. Conscious capitalism, this is another brand that we're building, and I know everybody in this room is on board for that, but my industry has been consciously doing that for many generations. How many of you buy vitamins anywhere or organic food? How many have you gone to Whole Foods or a store like that? How many Costco or Walmart? Well, Costco or Walmart we didn't go to them, okay? They came to the natural products industry. They waived their $75,000 slotting fees because they wanted part of this marketplace. So these are brands that you see here that really emulate conscious capitalism. Okay, women are more likely than men to believe in the science on global warming, according to Scientific American. And one of the things I wanted to mention on the conscious consumer, using a negative to build trust and cooperation. I know that David Fenton here will remember the Klar scare because he publicized it in 1989, and Meryl Streep was the voice. And I used that to start a magazine called The Organic Times for the trade in the natural products industry, where we gave voice to the financial and functional trade side of growing an organic movement, and you can see that we broke a record here. So we have extraordinary power to use something that is potentially devastating like climate change. Simple greenwashing isn't enough. This is really important. It's not, as women leaders, business owners, and marketers, we need to drive the narrative towards a future of collaborative, shared action to face and mitigate climate change. I'm going to leave this. This is the Eiffel Tower, and this is the power of women in networking and the power of AREDAY, because I met Jacob Scheer here last year, who was a presenter. I dragged him to the Natural Products Industry trade show. He knew nothing about natural products or industry, and he was doing an installation in Paris. This is a real photo of the soil story, which is part of my interest and background, is carbon soil sequestration. And with Jacob, I raised $30,000 to get the soil story. So marketing is powerful, and so is AREDAY.
Thank you.
Go Janice, right? Thank you. Anyway, I am a South Dakota cowgirl that was mentored by my grandmother. And when I moved to Aspen, Colorado, after having studied political science and architecture and international relations and wanting to make a difference in the world and be the first woman president of the United States, which everybody in South Dakota told me I could do, I came to Aspen, and I was so fortunate to be mentored by Mrs. Pepke, who was one of our, the Pepke family was one of the big influencers here in Aspen that did a lot to develop us along the body, mind, and spirit. And at that time, Stacey Stanley was our mayor. He was the youngest mayor in the history of America at 28. He was my boyfriend, so I was technically the first lady of Aspen in those days, so it was an easy shot at being president. And we elected each other to office. We put everybody on the city campaigns in the county. Michael Kinsley was our county commissioner. He's now at the Rocky Mountain Institute. Good connection there. We appointed our own city attorneys. And we had the vision to do the first growth management plan in America. And I was on the zoning commission at that time. And we said, our bumper sticker was, don't Californicate Colorado. And we meant it. So we sat down and we elected each other to office and supported each other and wrote this plan that tried to create a balance in the community that would be reviewed by our public all the time, that would have sustainable values. We have some of the greatest open space trails, employee housing by the people of Aspen that wanted these things. And we put it in a plan, said we'll review it every year. If you've got a project you want to submit to us, these are the values we care about. And if you care about them, the more of them you have, the better our community will be. And that's one of the reasons Aspen is such a great place, is because those values have continued to be a guideline here in what we're trying to do. There's so many of you in the room that have been part of this, so honoring Mrs. Pepke at this time is a wonderful moment for all of us. At the same time, I've always been involved with the indigenous peoples from not only my own state of South Dakota, but all over the world. Because once you live in Aspen, you do live all over the world because everybody comes here. And when I first came here, I was also a mountain climber as well as a skier and a hiker. And we decided to put a group together to go climb Mount Himalchuli in the Himalayas and do some medical research on the Sherpas and see how they could survive at such high altitudes and build clinics and work on population control because those were the issues that we cared about. So fundraised, got over there, spent the next 5 years of my life going over there for months at a time, doing different climbing or trekking expeditions, fell in love with the Tibetan refugees and their camps, started working with the women and the children, because my grandmother in South Dakota taught us how to make everything. Made all my own clothes, doll clothes, till I went to college. Never had a store-bought dress till then. So I thought that's what everybody did. And in America they didn't, but every place else in the world I went, all the third world countries I went to, the women were making these amazing textiles. And so I would say, oh, can you do this and this and this and bring it back to my house and have a big trunk show and tell their stories? And so did some of the first microfinance. So that's a little bit about my background and what I care about, that I care about the planet. I'm an activist and peacemaker, and women carry a sacred message and men carry a sacred message. And as we fly with the eagle and balanced wheels, we need to, or wings, we need to fly together, honoring what's sacred and helping those around the world as well as in our own backyard. So that's all for now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Leanne Wheeler. I have had the privilege of serving this great country in the United States Air Force. I'm a Desert Storm veteran. I've spent 22 years in defense contracting and then have gone on to start my own small businesses, one in engineering and technical services, the other is Wheeler Advisory Group, where I'm doing a lot of work in transition space for our veterans in the great state of Colorado into the growth sectors here. I am here today to speak briefly about the Women Veterans Project that I'm leading now with the Colorado Clean Energy Cluster. As we contemplate women being 1 in 5 of the service members who are yet active duty and then transition into the private sector, I am ever mindful of the great training that we've all received, and certainly in a system that could be considered arguably patriarchal. However, we all got the same training, we all performed in the same methods. At the tender age of 19, I had a $1 million responsibility for equipment that supported the mission of this country. And so I've always understood that women being in any force or mission is a force multiplier. and that it is imperative to leverage that across community as we transition back. And so I look forward to any discussion we have around that topic. I know for a fact what we bring. It's certainly the spirit of community. We are, in fact, natural leaders. We understand that it falls on us to educate our communities, to stand boldly for our communities, and certainly to speak for those of us who cannot speak for ourselves. And so with the proper training and access, this is a skill set that I know that we have underutilized, to your earlier point, for 250 plus years. We have an opportunity now to leverage that. And so I'll look forward to our continued discussion.
Thank you.
Great. So my name is Leilani Münter. I am a biology graduate turned race car driver and environmental activist. And typically when I talk on stage, I talk about how I use my position as a race car driver to talk about things that I feel are solutions to a lot of our climate problems, like electric cars, solar panels, plant-based diet. But I'm going to tear up my script today because I've spent most of my morning talking about something that I think is very important, and that is human population. I do feel like that is the big white elephant in the room that much of the environmental community does not talk about, perhaps because it's an uncomfortable discussion to have, and it can be a very volatile discussion. When I was in college at UC San Diego studying biology, one of my biochemistry professors actually closed the book one day and he said, you know, I'm not going to talk about biochemistry today, I am going to talk about human population. And he showed us a film, and I remember being deeply affected by that, and I walked all the way across the UCSD campus discussing population with him. I've spent the last few years working with the Oceanic Preservation Society on a film called Racing Extinction. Has anybody in here seen the film? So I don't know if you remember, but there's a part that I really like in Racing Extinction where Louis goes in to explain deep time. He says, you know, deep time is a very difficult concept to have, but if we were to take deep time and put it on a 24-hour clock, where on that clock would humans come in? And we come in just a couple of seconds before midnight. And we've managed to drive so many species to extinction just in those last couple of minutes, those last couple of seconds on this deep time clock. So my husband and I are child-free by choice. I do feel like it's something that, you know, women can be leaders in. Obviously, we are the ones that are having the babies if we choose to. And so I think we need to sort of normalize this discussion and start talking about it a little bit more. Many ecologists estimate that if there is a number of humans that they think that the Earth can handle as far as our demands on natural resources, many of the ecologists have kind of agreed on a number of 2 billion people. So we are currently at a rate of 7.4 billion people, and we have a growth rate of over 200,000 people per day. One of my favorite quotes is Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor is it the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change." And so I really think that it's time for people to perhaps adapt to this new situation that we're in. And perhaps part of that discussion needs to be choosing to be child-free by choice. And you know, there's 130 million, according to UNICEF, 130 million orphans in the world. So if women really want to be a mother, there are hundreds of millions of kids that need a home. And it's a difficult conversation to bring up, and I've only just recently started to talk about it because I know this is a tough subject to bring up, but being on a women's panel and also talking about climate change and talking about our planet, you know, I felt that this was a good place for me to bring it up and, you know, maybe just start the discussion. And I know it's a tough one, but I do strongly believe that we need to talk about it, and I think that women need to be a part of leading that discussion.
Thank you. Well, I'll jump in so you're not out there by yourself, Leilani. I think one of the other issues too, one, I think we need to understand around population that there's a lot of cultural norms that we need to be able to discuss openly so that women do feel that they can discuss population and whether they want to have children or not. Another thing, just to add, that I've been in discussion with a lot of the young women that we work with who are actually working in the environment is that they don't want to have children. They've actually come to the conclusion as well that they're so concerned about the future, they don't want to bring children into a situation where they're concerned about, what kind of life their children will have. So I think this is something that I've been able to have a conversation with a lot of millennials. It's a very different reality that they have. I think it's a great conversation, and we need to carry it on. I'm getting the time card, so I wanted to just end with a quick story because I think it's important that we hear a few success stories about women. So I'm just going to tell a quick story. This is just like the opening of a conversation that we could keep having. So I'm glad everyone brought up these topics. And then maybe we could just do a quick final comment from all of you. One of the things that I've been really inspired by is a group of women that we're working with in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we're doing a comprehensive project in which we went into the DR Congo to do forest conservation and preservation. And I won't go into why forests are important because you all know that by now. But a whole portion of the Tombe rainforest has been slashed and burned or cut down through illegal timber harvesting. So we went in to really support the indigenous Pygmy women there in both stopping cutting the old growth forest, but also to regenerate and regrow a forest. Because not only is it empowering these women who, quite frankly, are seen as at the bottom rung of society. I mean, they live in a culture in which not only are women not valued, but especially indigenous women are even valued less. So it's been a really incredible project because not only are we working to give them a way out of poverty through growing these trees, but also a way to ennoble themselves and see themselves as really important. And we brought one of them to the United Nations conference in Paris where she could tell her story about the Pygmy women and really show that now they're suddenly stewards of a forest that's saving humanity from global warming. And their narrative changing has just been so beautiful. We put 5,000 trees in the ground last year on a pilot project, and this year we're planting 20,000 trees. And every year we want to go up. Next year it'll be 50,000 trees. And to be involved in watching these women heal themselves while they're also healing the land has been totally amazing, and that we can regenerate our forests, we can regrow our forests. And I think it's important to bring in this new narrative of healing the land and healing the women at the same time. So I wanted to just share that story, and then let's go on down the line for any final comments.
Well, as far as population, I believe that as women, we are birthing a new planet, and we have plenty to do without birthing more children. And I actually also think as a networker that there are enough of us on this planet who are aware at this point to create a tipping point. The challenge is we don't know each other. So it is incumbent upon us to collaborate, to network, to cross-pollinate like there's no tomorrow. Because if we don't, there won't be. And if we do, we now have enough people to create a tipping point for a socially just and sustainable world.
Thank you.
I chose not to have children because I saw how many of them were out there that needed mothers. And we are the mothers of all the children. And I step up there for that all the time, and I think we all do anyway as women. But I thought, I don't need to bring another one. My mother warned me that that might be a very dangerous idea, and I took her advice. And so that was my position on it for those reasons. I've also spent a lot of time in Asia, and I lived in Indonesia, in Bali. I had the privilege to work with Linda Garland, and we started the Environmental Bamboo Foundation to grow a sustainable life that way and create mechanisms for people in the valley, villages to grow their own homes and grow their own food and become more self-reliant and have those tools. So bamboo had been an important point in our whole permaculture applications to doing the developments I've been involved with. Now a development called POEM, Palaces of Extraordinary Miracles, creating places of healing and health. We have our new hydrocarbon technologies coming up, and integrating home and business and our planet is just really important. And amen, let's keep connecting through AREDAY and beyond.
Yeah, for sure. And so I actually come to this topic from the context of a Black woman in America, where the dialogue from my social upbringing is one around access and control over my own body. And so as we're having discussions about choice, oftentimes the poor, the underprivileged in this country don't have such access to choice. And so as we're having the conversation, and we are in fact being contemplative about what reproduction is doing to the planet, we also need to be taking a look at policies that affect our choice. As I reflect back to a data point I saw recently, I've seen it recently, that since the signing of the Constitution, there have been 600 plus pieces of legislation drafted in this country that regulate the body of women, and specifically poor women and poor women of color. Zero pieces of legislation have been written, drafted, approved that regulate men's bodies. And so until we start having a conversation around that and we show up as women in legislature and start that dialogue, choice is simply a luxury that the poor can't afford. And so we really do need to get to a balance of understanding that that is the context and climate. I wanted to add one success story. I've had the privilege of working on a Department of Energy grant, women veterans coming in and learning the technology for hybrid electric vehicles. And typically when we think about mechanics and the messiness of that, we think that is a man's business. And what we've been able to demonstrate through this grant is that clean tech, as it relates to hybrid electric vehicles, and the fact that now things are more computer-based, less brawn-driven, we're finding that women do a better job of the entire repair, troubleshooting, and solution set than their male counterparts in these classes. And so as a result of that class, we had 2 women who went off to start their own shops. Yeah.
So I can see we're already over time, so I'm just going to say this is exactly why I brought it up. I wanted us to all start talking about this subject. I think it is very important. My motto has always been never underestimate a vegan hippie chick with a race car, and I'm considering changing it to never underestimate a child-free vegan hippie chick with a race car, just to start the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.